is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path.
A reading from the book of Genesis. Israel set out with all that was his. When he arrived at Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Their God, speaking to Israel in a vision by night, called, "Jacob, Jacob." He answered, "Here I am." Then he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you a great nation. Not only will I go down to Egypt with you, I will also bring you back here after Joseph has closed your eyes." So Jacob departed from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel put their father and their wives and children on the wagons that Pharaoh had sent for his transport. They took with them their livestock and the possessions they had acquired in the land of Canaan. Thus Jacob and all his descendants migrated to Egypt. His sons and his grandsons, his daughters and his granddaughters, all his descendants, he took with him to Egypt. Israel had sent Judah ahead to Joseph, so that he might meet him in Goshen. On his arrival in the region of Goshen, Joseph hitched the horses to his chariot and rode to meet his father Israel in Goshen. As soon as Joseph saw him, he flung himself on his neck and wept a long time in his arms. And Israel said to Joseph, "At last I can die, now that I have seen for myself that Joseph is still alive." The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Saint Matthew. Jesus said to his apostles, "Behold, I am sending you like sheep in the midst of wolves. So be shrewd as serpents and simple as doves. But beware of men, for they will hand you over to courts and scourge you in their synagogues, and you will be led before governors and kings for my sake, as a witness before them and the pagans. When they hand you over, do not worry about how you are to speak or what you are to say. You will be given at that moment what you are to say. For it will not be you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will hand over brother to death, and the father his child. Children will rise up against parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by all because of my name. But whoever endures to the end will be saved. When they persecuted you in one town, flee to another. Amen, I say to you, you will not finish the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes." The Gospel of the Lord.
My dear friends, in today's reflection, Jesus takes us to the realm of earthly powers and giving instructions to his disciples to overcome the barriers of the earthly powers. In the past few days, we reflected on the power of healing and the power over unclean spirits. Today, Jesus gives us his instructions that we need to be clever as snakes and as innocent as doves. That means, my dear friends, in our innocence, in our faith, in our devotion, in our spirituality, we need to have that simplicity, humility, and innocence. But we need also to be clever and be strong enough to overcome worldly powers, persecutions, and barriers. Because, my dear friends, we are at times conditioned by political power, by worldly goods, and our desire for money and so on. Those things can hinder our spiritual growth and be a barrier at times in our human relationships, in our relationship with our family members or children or our neighbors or in society. Because of these barriers, we become so conditioned. But Jesus tells us that we need to overcome these barriers and to be on guard against all kinds of persecutions, powers, and troubleshooting areas. He gives his disciples the instruction, as I mentioned, to be clever as snakes and as innocent as doves. Therefore, my dear friends, in this world, as we live on, we got to inculcate into our value system that innocence first, in order that we practice virtues and humility in trusting in God. But we also need to be on guard, perhaps to be very defensive in our actions by being clever in order to avoid evil influences or earthly powers and harassment. Because, my dear friends, at times power, wealth, or our desire for earthly things can hinder our spiritual growth. But if we have deep down that simplicity and humility and that innocence, we can concentrate to overcome them and to gain spiritual power and spiritual strength in order to find spiritual assistance and sustenance in our lives.